So I have a little bit here on produced water treatment. I'm kind of running a little short on time, but so produced water is salty. Any sort of alternative treatment process is going to take a lot of energy. Water and salt like each other. Pulling those two things apart is always going to take a lot of energy. And typically you're going to need some sort of pre-treatment. There's the salt, that's the biggest driver, but you have to do something before that in order to make the desalination process work. So the main technologies are thermal processes and membrane technologies. There's also ion exchange that can be used, but that tends to not be as cost effective at higher concentrations of salts. So you have these other issues that, yeah, anytime you try to take something and concentrate it, you're going to get one stream of fresh water, but you're also going to get this concentrated water. And whenever you concentrate those things together, that's going to cause issues like scaling. And then finally, you're still going to have some wastewater that's left over. Even if you separate it, the treatment process isn't going to make this go away. It's simply going to create two streams. One of them is fresh water. The other one is the salt water. So what this might look like, I found another diagram. So you would probably have some sort of gravity process that you use to get the salts and the oil initially. Then another physical separation process to remove more of the salts and oil. At that point, you'd be left primarily with dissolved pollutants. You need to get the metals and organic material out of there before you could actually send it to a desalination process and something like nanofiltration. There are lots of different possibilities. Then you have your desalination process, which would be either some sort of distillation or a membrane process. And then that is going to generate a concentrate that has to be disposed of still. A thermal process, yeah, I don't have a whole lot of experience with this, but the main point I would make is that it's a relatively mature technology. This multi-stage flash desalination and multi-effect distillation are a couple of ways. The main point here is that you want to recapture all the heat from these technologies by using a series of different processes so you don't waste the heat. But this is all technology that's fairly well established. I'm interested in working. I have a collaborator in chemical engineering that is an expert in membrane development, and so I'm interested in collaborating with him to try to think about ways. I think membranes have the longer-term potential to be cheaper because it takes less energy to use membranes than it does to boil the water off, basically. And so membranes, the idea with the membrane is you have stuff in the water that could be dissolved or that could be particulate. You have a membrane that will prevent these things, that has holes in it, you could think of as that are smaller than the size of whatever it is that's on this side. So you apply a force here, push the water through, and you leave the bigger stuff behind. And these membranes can be larger to smaller size, all the way down to the size of salt ions, so that you're left with just pure water on this end. And these are the main categories: microfiltration for moving bacteria, things at that size, then large organic molecules with ultrafiltration, nanofiltration for larger ions, and then inorganic ions, the salt basically with RO. And RO, again, osmosis is something that happens in nature. So the water follows the salt. The water likes to go from lower concentrations to higher concentrations if you put them next to each other. So here, this is lower concentration and higher, so the water will move through here like this. The idea with reverse osmosis is simply to apply some sort of force to push it the opposite direction. So that's where the energy comes from, and this is an example of that. And so in the end, with any membrane process, you're going to get a concentrated solution and a fresh solution. You need energy. The low solubility ions, so when you start concentrating something, things are going to precipitate out of solution, and that's going to cause solids that could mess up your process. So more research is needed to try to think about ways to increase the amount of yield of water that you get out of that relative to the concentrate, and a lot of that is driven by scaling issues with magnesium and calcium species. You can also get bacteria that may be growing on the membrane. And so I'm interested in doing some more work with that. And so, in summary, oil and gas production, yes, it causes lots of environmental impacts, but it's a vital part of our economy for the near term, at least. Along with that, we get this produced water issue. While it's not a new issue, it is something that has recently reemerged with all the new oil and gas production around the state. And so the idea here is to try to recycle the water. Can we find more intelligent ways to use that as a resource for productive purposes rather than just injecting it underground where it's a waste product. But it's going to require a multidisciplinary team of people to look at all these sociological, legal, and the technical issues in order to reuse it. And so that's pretty much everything I have. And so thanks very much for your time. And I can take questions if we have time. So. Yes.
Do you have the cost analysis of the different disposal? Is that in print somewhere?
Yes, this is all up for review. If you want to read it, there's a 70-page report, and it's draft form. So if you want to read it and you want to give me thoughts about what's wrong with it, then, or if you want something else to be there, just Google the Water 20/60 Produced Water Working Group, and you can find it. And the report and the presentation that was given are both, the slide deck are on the website. So you can take a look at that if you want more information about that, certainly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. You talked about the high salt concentration
Right.
in produced water.
Right.
And then you said the salt concentration is not really very important for reusing the water for fracking, but for agriculture.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So what is important for reusing the frack water for fracking? What needs to be removed from the water?
Yeah, I think that the issues they run into have a lot to do with, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So the first question was where can we get more information about the produced water study, and that is available online. This question was about what needs to be done to reuse water for other fracking purposes. I think the main issues are with scale formation. It's the same ones that you would see with desalination. When you mix these different brines together, you may have the right cation, the right anion that get together and cause a solid from one place to another. But I think that you also might get microorganisms that are growing in the water that you have to remove. So I think those are the two main things. But honestly, I don't have a whole lot of experience with the actual treatment processes for the reuse technologies. So does that give you a little bit of information, hopefully? So I think the scale formation, the bacteria are the big issues. Yeah. Yeah.
Did the group look at the solar thermal evaporation ponds?
I think that was definitely not part of this study. That's been kind of spearheaded by CH2M. But I think that's certainly using some sort of renewable technology to do the water treatment makes a lot of sense. And that's something that we were looking at in this proposal we recently wrote. So yeah, the question was if they looked at solar evaporation technologies. So yeah, Jason, yeah.
On the evaporative treatment, I mean, they've done that forever.
Yeah, right.
They did that before they realized they could poke a hole down in the earth and have it suck down into the ground.
Sure.
And there's a reason why they went to injection over that cheaper alternative.
Right.
Is because of the waste stream that comes from evaporative treatment. You still have all.
That's right. You would still have to inject it. Some of that probably. So
is that included in that 50 cents?
It should be. Yeah, it is. I'm pretty sure that is still built into that 50-cent number. But again, I would encourage you to go and read the report to look at the details. So the cost breakdown was not as extensive as I would have liked to have seen, but I think that might be in the report. So, but it should. I think they pretty, the people that were looking at this are very familiar with all the issues, and so I'm pretty sure that they included the cost to still inject that concentrated component. So. Hmm. Okay, well,
You'll have a Superfund site one way or the other.
Well, it won't be. It's not toxic, but they've got groundwater salinity. I mean, it's essentially run
the aquifer there. Yeah, in my opinion, this is more of an issue of water, protecting the existing water than creating new water. And one of the things I mentioned in there was that it's only 1% of the water that gets used in oil and gas. So, I mean, yeah, we'd like to be able to reuse it all, but I would be more concerned ultimately with, destroying the quality of some aquifer that creates some sort of long-term 30-year issue than I think that's one of the biggest issues, and that will be a huge, legal and technical issue to address if they're going to actually look at reusing it for agriculture or some other surface discharge.
They know
So.
what they're doing. Well, because the most recent newscast I saw where someone was talking about how they figured everything out was that they said evaporative treatment was going to be a big part of that, but they've got to have somewhere to put the salt where it is encased.
Those evaporation numbers that I showed you were not. Those are not capturing the water. That was just driving it off into the atmosphere. So those are not. So, the end product there, they're not trying to recapture that water for whatever that's
Well, and
worth.
that's
Yeah.
what the newscast
So that's
made
what
it sound
that.
like they were trying to recapture it through evaporative treatment. I'm like, if it
Yeah.
evaporates, it doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like they're going to use evaporative treatment to drive off the water, concentrate the salts, and hopefully dispose of the salts
Right.
in a way that is different than they've done in the past, which is essentially burying them. And then they leach out into the ground, and then you've got 1,000
Saline
acres
groundwater.
of
Yeah.
salt.
Yeah. Good points. Any other questions?
I think we got a class
Got it.
coming up.
All right.
So appreciate it.
Thank you.